If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
Trade deadline. But before we move on from the Knicks did move Cam Reddish, but they did not find new homes for some other player that had been rumored to be on the trading block. So Obi Toppin was a player that some people thought would get shipped out of here. He is still in New York, despite the fact that he has not been getting a lot of playing time because of the emergence of Julius Randle, Derrick Rose, and Evan Fournier, two vets who were seen, in high regards last season, have not played much this season. Those guys are still on the team. I don't know if you saw Evan Fournier's Instagram post. He posted a picture of him smiling on the Garden Court saying that he can unpack his stuff now. So because he knew he wasn't leaving. So Evan Fournier, again, takes everything in stride, as we've seen him a lot this season do that. So those three guys are still on the team. Are you surprised that none of them were dealt?
Obi's a different story. As far as Fournier and Rose are concerned, I'm not shocked. Obviously, the Knicks would have done it had they, received anything of value back or not had to attach draft capital. They would have had to, attach a first-round pick to get rid of Fournier. And he's shown that, he can be on any given night, score 17 and contribute off the bench if you have injuries or something. There's just no reason. It's, moving him wouldn't have, give the Knicks a max cap slot this offseason. So there's just really no motivation to do so. Obviously, when he's an expiring contract this time next year, different story. Rose, if they needed to facilitate as a third team, in terms of salary slot, become a third team and to facilitate a deal that might have made sense. But again, they're not going to attach draft capital to get rid of him. It's potential. I wouldn't be shocked if they discussed a buyout with Rose. If another team, say the Suns, needed a backup point guard, or the Lakers, they have plenty of point guard depth now, but one of those other teams, a competitive team, top 5 in the conference, a chance where Rose would get some on court and have a chance to make a run. If they felt that was best for the organization, I have no doubt that they would do what's best for D Rose. So we'll see if that happens. As far as Obi goes, it sounds like the front office has a higher, they place a higher valuation on Toppin than the coaching staff does. It sounds like their asking price for Obi was a little bit too high, but whereas the coaches doesn't feel that he's ready to contribute defensively, basketball IQ wise. We'll see how that turns out. We've talked about this ad infinitum. Now that Obi's going to be here for the rest of the season. Does he play more than 10 minutes a night? 12 minutes a night, probably less likely now that Josh Hart's in the picture. What do they do this offseason? He's extension eligible. They probably don't offer him extension, which means he'll essentially be on the precipice of restricted free agency in the final year of his rookie contract. How does that play out? Again, it's just hard to figure out where he's going to get playing time, where he's going to have an opportunity to prove that he's, capable of more as long as Randall's healthy. But they didn't sell low on him, which is in some respects,
yeah.
So that's one positive. And obviously, this team is looking to catch the 6 seed, catch the 5 seed, at least stay at 7 seed or higher. And doing so, they didn't really have a true backup 4. Obviously, Obi's the backup 4, which protects you, gives you insurance should Randall get injured. So I'm not shocked by any means.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. I think Fournier he just wasn't going to have any takers this season. I mean, we saw last year with Alec Burks, who was making less money than Fournier, that teams weren't going to take a guy who they looked at as probably a net negative and keep him on for another year, and with another year left on his contract. Like Burks had another year left, so the Knicks couldn't move him last year. They were begging teams to take him, and nobody would take him. When it came to the draft, then there was someone interested, and that was Detroit. So we saw the same thing with Nerlens Noel. So I think that we're going to see the same thing with Fournier. Nobody wanted to take him this year. I get that. We know what he is defensively. We know he hits some shots, but the defense really hurts you. And he's making a pretty penny for a guy who doesn't really provide anything other than some shooting. So I think this offseason you'll see him get moved, maybe in the draft, maybe around June, July 1st, somewhere around there. But he was going to stay. Derrick Rose, he is a team option, so you thought maybe he was a little more likely. Maybe someone would take a flyer on him. But there, as we saw during the trade deadline, there were a lot of better guards who were being shipped around. So I didn't really see a market for him for based on the guards they got traded. And then with Toppin, I mean, look, I guess like I said on the last podcast, like he's my favorite Knick right now on this team. So I'm happy he's here still. But I also feel like I'm not surprised they lost him because if you lose them, you don't have a backup four. Like they don't like the Knicks have a kind of a weirdly constructed roster to some degree, and it made like that's why the Jared Vanderbilt thing made a little sense. Is all right if you're gonna lose Toppin, like you need to replace him with somebody. So Vanderbilt was someone who would slide in there. But if you're not gonna replace him with a viable player, then what's the point of trading him? And I think that probably in a lot of these deals that they were talking about with other teams may have been offering a lot of second round picks, maybe even first round picks, but if the Knicks are trying to win this season. So if they trade Toppin, they don't have a backup four man, and all their other wings, they don't have any combo wings really. The guys who will play 3 and 4, it didn't really make much sense. So I'm not. I kind of thought the Toppin stuff was a little overblown in terms of like, oh, he's definitely gonna get traded because there were so many things that had to work in a deal. They had to get back maybe a competent draft pick, or a massive upgrade in their back on the bench. And they would also have to replace Toppin. So I just thought that too many things would have to work out perfectly for the Knicks to find a deal that made sense. So I wasn't surprised either that none of these guys got traded.
I thought the Wiseman trade was interesting in terms of Obi Toppin because like Toppin, Wiseman's a second draft guy, and Troy Weaver in Detroit is known for taking a chance, rolling the dice on those second draft, meaning the guy didn't pan out with the team that originally drafted him. Now you're trading or acquiring or signing as a free agent one of these young, unproven players. And all the Pistons had to do was give up 5 second round picks, granted, which was like the going rate for players yesterday. But yeah, for the Pistons to get a player with Wiseman's upside, I really like that for Detroit, even though they have a ton of centers.
That's a problem.
That's an issue, and they'll have to figure that out. I'm surprised there wasn't a corresponding move, and I think Nerlens Noel hits the buyout market because of it. But again, if Wiseman if no team was willing to trade a first round pick for Wiseman, that tells you that Obi, wasn't, and another team likely wasn't going to invest a first rounder in Toppin. So I thought that kind of gave a sense of the market for those kind of undervalued, young players that hadn't panned out with their original team.
I mean, finally kind of put a bow on this Knicks trade deadline. How do you kind of grade how the team did, considering the move they made and the move they didn't make with these other players?
I think the first time we can give a grade to it is, April 15th or whatever, when the end of the play-in tournament, end of the playoffs. I initially like it. So I'm not going to second guess it. I think it was a smart trade. I think it was a good trade. I think Hart helps the team. But ultimately, this trade will be determined by what happens on July 1st in free agency, because if they don't re-sign, and again, I definitely think Hart will opt out. It's only a $12.9 million player option. He can get far more than that via long-term cash, even if it's annually. Even if he had to settle for 12, he'll get 3-4 years at $12 million.
Yeah,
I think his annual cost will be closer to 15. So again, the Knicks need to retain him in order for this trade to be to truly work out. So that my sense is, again, we haven't mentioned it yet. Josh Hart is not only a Villanova guy, not only a Thibs guy, he's also a CAA guy. So there's obviously I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Leon Rose might have a little familiarity with what Hart is looking at in free agency, what his agent thinks he's worth, what his agent thinks he'll get, whether he'll opt out. Did they discuss the Knicks can also sign him to a 2-year extension? Is that a possibility before he opts into free agency? They extend 2 years on the, he picks up the player option, then they extend 2 years on top of that. My guess is they intend to do that. You don't trade a first round pick or potentially a first round pick to rent a veteran on a team that's around 500 for 3 months. That's bad business. So I don't think they'll, anything can happen. That's certainly a possibility. He doesn't get along, whatever the case might be. But I think that's outside the likelihood of happening. So I think they need to re-sign him in order for the trade to be truly successful. I think they'll do that. And I think you'll have a core piece around the Brunson, the Brunson IQ, Mitch Rob, Grimes, RJ, although I think, and big picture, and we'll talk about this next week and during the All-Star break when we have some time, I think this lays the groundwork for RJ being traded this offseason. Whether I was kind of happy that OG Anunoby didn't get moved at the deadline, because now I think there's a greater likelihood that the Knicks are in play this offseason. But I think that RJ's tenure with the team is the most tenuous it's been since he got drafted. Let me just say that. I don't think it's a likelihood they'll trade him. I don't think they're dying to move him. I don't think they're desperate to trade him. They'd be happy to hold him. But if the Knicks are going to go superstar hunting, RJ and draft picks, I think, is the package they're going to put out there. They did it with Donovan Mitchell. Now they're even more likely to do it. Now that they have a very good starting, I shouldn't say very good, but a competent, above average starting small forward that can contribute and fits in well alongside Brunson and Randall, as we mentioned. So as far as the grade goes, I like it initially, but they have to keep them long term in order for it to be a truly successful deal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that if Hart bounces this offseason and a Knicks season that ends, I would hope it ends at least in the playoffs. Right. But it ends in a first round exit. I mean, I don't know how much that does for me, but if they are able to keep him and they make the playoffs, maybe they lose in 6 games or 5 games to one of these teams, the top end teams, and you say, okay, you got back to where you were, the first year you were Tibbs. You made the playoffs, which you didn't make last year. I think you feel fine with that, as long as Hart can stay in the fold. And you sign him that contract, that makes sense too. You're the 9 guy I want to see signed to 4 years, $100 million or something like that. If it's a reasonable deal, I think that's a good move for the Knicks. I do want to